She sold her last possession for a ticket west, never guessing a cowboy yearned for her. Clara woke up before sunrise as she had done for as long as she could remember. The first light of the day barely touched the horizon, casting a soft golden glow over the small town she had always known. The town was quiet, except for the occasional crow cawing from a nearby fence post and the faint creak of old wooden doors opening. For most people, mornings were a simple routine, but for Clara, this morning felt heavier than most. Today she was leaving everything she had ever known. Her small house sat at the edge of town, weathered by years of sun, wind, and rain. It had once been lively with laughter and chatter, but now it felt empty. Her father's illness had slowed him down, making it hard for him to work the farm or even leave his chair. Her younger siblings, Sarah and Ben, were still too young to understand much about the world, but they depended on Clara in every way, and yet she could not stay. Staying meant slowly sinking under the weight of responsibility with no hope of finding her own path. Clara had thought long and hard about this decision. She had measured every coin, every item she owned, and every possible outcome. There was nothing left to sell but the one thing she had kept closest to her heart, a delicate locket that had belonged to her mother. It was old and tarnished, but the tiny photo inside, a picture of her mother smiling, made Clara's heart swell every time she looked at it. Her mother had always dreamed big, telling Clara that life was too short to stay where you are unhappy. Now, her own daughter had to carry that dream forward, even if it meant letting go of the locket that held so many memories. She held it in her hand, one last time, tracing the smooth edges with her thumb. Her fingers lingered on the tiny engraving inside. For my Clara, always. A lump formed in her throat. Selling it felt like selling a part of her soul, but the money it would bring could buy her a ticket west, a ticket to a place she had never seen but hoped would offer freedom, opportunity, and a chance to make a life for herself. She tucked the locket into her hand, imagining that it would bring someone else joy, even as her own heart ached. Clara walked to town with slow, measured steps. Each house, each street corner felt familiar, but she could no longer call them home. As she approached the small shop where she would sell her locket, she saw the shopkeeper, Mr. Ken Tail, Higgins, arranging items on a worn wooden counter. He looked up and smiled faintly when he saw her, but Clara could see the curiosity in his eyes, as if he already knew what she was about to do. "Morning, Clara," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "What brings you here so early?" Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. I need to sell something," she said quietly. She placed the locket on the counter, its gold surface gleaming faintly in the morning light. "It's important to me, but I need the money for a ticket." Mr. Higgins picked up the locket, turning it over in his hands. "I understand," he said gently. "I know this isn't easy for you." He offered her a fair price, and after a moment of hesitation, Clara accepted. She counted the coins carefully, her hands trembling slightly, and slipped them into the small pouch she had brought. With the money in her possession, the reality of her journey began to settle in. There was no turning back now. The train station was a short walk from the shop, but it felt like miles. Clara's heart pounded as she approached the platform. The whistle of the arriving train echoed in the morning air, a reminder that her life was about to change forever. People bustled around, some boarding, some saying their goodbyes, all caught up in their own worlds. Clara felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. She had imagined this moment countless times, but imagining it was nothing like living it. As she waited for the train, she thought about her family. Her father had tried to hide his worry, but she could see it in his eyes. Her siblings clung to her, unsure of what it meant to say goodbye. "All right," she promised, though she wasn't entirely sure how she would manage it. She knelt down, hugging them tightly, memorizing their small faces, their hopeful eyes, their uncertain smiles. She whispered words of love and reassurance, even though her own heart was heavy with the fear of leaving them behind. Finally, the train arrived, puffing steam into the crisp morning air. Clara took a deep breath, lifted her small bag, and stepped onto the platform. The conductor tipped his hat, and she nodded in return. As the train began to move, she pressed her hand against the window, watching the town shrink behind her. The familiar streets, the old houses, the fields where she had played as a child, all of it became smaller and smaller, until it was just a memory. Clara felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief, because she was finally taking control of her life, stepping into a world full of possibilities. Sadness, because she was leaving behind the life she knew, the people she loved, and the comfort of familiarity. She hugged her bag close, feeling the coins in her pocket, and whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to." As the train rolled further west, Clara began to notice the other passengers. Some were families traveling together, some were merchants, and some, like her, seemed to be seeking a new start. She kept to herself, watching the landscape change outside the window. The flat fields of her hometown gave way to rolling hills, streams, and clusters of trees she had never seen before. Each passing scene was a reminder that the world was larger than she had ever imagined, full of opportunities and challenges she would soon face. It was then that she noticed him, a cowboy, sitting a few seats away, his hat tipped low over his eyes. He seemed to be watching her, though when she looked up, he quickly returned to his own thoughts. There was something about him that caught her attention, something quiet and steady, like a calm presence in the midst of uncertainty. She turned back to the window, but she could feel his gaze lingering even as she tried to ignore it. The train continued its journey, and Clara let her thoughts wander. She imagined the new life awaiting her, the work she would do, the people she might meet. She pictured herself standing tall, independent and free, no longer bound by the limitations of her old town. Yet, in the back of her mind, she could not shake the feeling that someone or something was quietly observing her, waiting to become part of this new chapter. As the hours passed, Clara drifted into a light sleep, lulled by the rhythmic motion of the train. In her dreams, she saw glimpses of the west. Vast open plains, mountains in the distance, sunsets that painted the sky with brilliant colors. She felt a sense of possibility, a whisper of hope that her sacrifices had not been in vain. When she woke, the cowboy was still there, reading a small notebook. Their eyes met briefly, and she offered a polite nod. To her surprise, he nodded back, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. There was no conversation yet, but a connection had been made. A quiet understanding that perhaps their paths were meant to cross. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the train car. Clara pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, feeling both the chill of the evening and the weight of her decisions. She had left everything familiar behind, sold the last thing that held sentimental value, and stepped into a future she could not fully see. But in that moment, as the train sped toward the west, she felt a spark of courage, a determination to face whatever challenges awaited her. And though she did not know it yet, her journey would not be just about survival or starting over. It would be about connections, unexpected friendships, and the quiet ways people could touch your life without warning. For Clara, the West was more than a destination. It was a chance to discover herself, to find strength she did not know she had, and perhaps to encounter someone who had already noticed her from afar, someone whose heart quietly longed for hers. The train moved steadily into the night, the stars beginning to twinkle above, each one a tiny promise of possibility. Clara sat back in her seat, letting the motion soothe her, letting the unknown ahead feel just a little less frightening. She had made her choice, and now she would face the adventure that awaited. The past was behind her, the future stretched out before her, and the world, vast and unknown, seemed ready to welcome her in ways she could not yet imagine. The train continued its journey across the wide open plains, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks a constant companion to Clara's thoughts. She had spent the last hours watching the scenery change, golden fields stretching endlessly, distant mountains rising like silent guardians, and rivers sparkling under the afternoon sun. Her heart felt a strange mixture of excitement and uncertainty. The West promised freedom, a chance to start over, but it also promised hard work and unknown challenges. Clara could not help but wonder if she had made the right choice. Across from her sat the cowboy. He had been quiet since she first noticed him on the train, reading his notebook, occasionally glancing out the window. Clara could not stop noticing him. The way his eyes were calm but observant, the quiet strength in his posture, the kind of presence that made the world seem a little steadier. There was something honest about him, something grounded that drew her curiosity despite herself. Finally, after several hours of riding in silence, the cowboy spoke. His voice was low, steady, and carried a soft warmth that made Clara feel unexpectedly at ease. "Heading west for a new start?" he asked, tilting his hat slightly so she could see his face more clearly. Clara blinked, startled by the question. She had not expected anyone to notice her purpose so plainly.
"Yes," she replied carefully.
I'm hoping for a fresh start." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of her journey, the sacrifice of leaving her family, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. He nodded thoughtfully. "I know that feeling," he said. "The West can be harsh, but it can also give you what you need, if you're willing to work for it." There was a quiet wisdom in his voice, a sense that he had experienced hardships and had learned to face them without complaint. Clara felt herself drawn to his calm certainty. It was comforting, like a steady hand guiding her through the unknown. "My name's Luke," he added, offering a small smile. "And you are?" "Clara," she said softly, returning his smile with a hint of curiosity. She found herself studying him in ways she had not intended, noticing the faint lines on his sun-tanned face, the way his hands were calloused from work, and the quiet patience that seemed to surround him like an invisible shield. There was something reliable about him, something she instinctively trusted. They began to talk in small bursts, sharing stories of their lives without giving too much away. Clara spoke of her hometown, the struggles she had faced, and her hopes for a new beginning. Luke listened attentively, never interrupting, his gaze steady and compassionate. When he spoke, his words were thoughtful, never rushed, always measured. Clara found herself relaxing in his presence, feeling that for the first time in a long while she could breathe without carrying the full weight of the world on her shoulders. As the hours passed, the train carried them through forests and valleys, each turn of the track revealing new landscapes. Clara told Luke about the decision to sell her mother's locket, how difficult it had been, and how it had symbolized both her past and the sacrifices she had made for her future. Luke listened quietly, his expression softening. He did not offer pity or judgment, only understanding and respect. It was a rare thing, and Clara felt a flicker of gratitude toward him, a quiet recognition that he was someone she could trust. They shared small meals together in the dining car, their conversations becoming easier and more natural. Luke told her about his work with cattle and the long journeys he had taken across the West. He spoke of the challenges he had faced, storms, rough terrain, and long days of labor, but also of the beauty he had witnessed, the open skies, the wide rivers, and the quiet moments that made the hardships worthwhile. Clara listened, fascinated by his stories, imagining herself learning to live in this new, untamed world. Over the days, a subtle connection began to form between them. Luke noticed Clara's quiet determination, the way she faced each day with courage despite her fears. Clara noticed Luke's gentle strength, the way he observed without judging and offered help without expectation. There was a slow, unspoken understanding growing between them, a sense that they were both travelers in search of something more: freedom, purpose, and perhaps companionship. One afternoon, the train stopped at a small town. Clara decided to step out for a few minutes, stretching her legs and breathing in the fresh air. Luke followed, and they walked together along the dusty streets, observing the small shops and the townsfolk going about their day. It was a simple moment, yet it felt significant. Clara felt the weight of her journey lighten slightly, simply by sharing the space with someone who seemed to understand her unspoken thoughts. As they walked, a sudden commotion drew their attention. A young boy had lost control of a horse, and the animal was running toward the street. Without thinking, Luke moved quickly, guiding the horse safely away from danger, while Clara stood frozen for a moment, watching in awe. The sight of his courage and quick thinking left a lasting impression on her. She realized that Luke's strength was not only physical but also moral, a calmness in chaos, a readiness to protect without boasting. The rest of the afternoon passed in a quiet rhythm, and when it was time to board the train again, Clara felt a strange sense of reluctance. She had grown accustomed to Luke's presence, to the way he listened, to the gentle kindness he offered without expectation. The idea of parting ways, even temporarily, made her stomach twist with an unfamiliar emotion, a mixture of hope, curiosity, and something more tender that she did not yet fully understand. On the train, they returned to their seats, and the journey continued into the evening. Clara gazed out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. Luke glanced at her, noticing the thoughtful expression on her face. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said quietly. Clara nodded, and for a moment they shared a comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts, while feeling the quiet bond growing between them. As night fell, the train car dimmed, and the passengers settled in for the long ride ahead. Clara lay back in her seat, reflecting on the past few days. She thought of her family, the sacrifices she had made, and the unknown future awaiting her. But she also thought of Luke. The way he had been there without pressing, the way he had noticed her struggles and offered support, the quiet patience that made her feel seen. For the first time since leaving home, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe she would not face the West alone. Luke, sitting across from her, scribbled in his notebook. He wrote not just about the journey, but about Clara, the way she carried herself, her quiet strength, the small gestures of kindness she offered to those around her. In his mind, he began to recognize that his feelings were shifting. What had started as curiosity and admiration was becoming something deeper. He found himself thinking about her when she wasn't around, wondering how she was feeling, hoping she was safe, and wishing he could be a part of the life she was trying to build. The days passed quickly as the train continued westward. Clara and Luke fell into a comfortable routine, sharing stories, meals, and small moments of laughter. They learned each other's habits, like the way Clara nervously twisted a strand of hair when deep in thought, or the way Luke tapped his fingers lightly on the seat when he was considering something. Each small detail added to the growing familiarity between them, a subtle intimacy that neither fully acknowledged but both felt deeply. One evening, a gentle rain began to fall outside, the droplets tapping softly against the train windows. Clara pressed her hand to the glass, watching the streaks blur the landscape beyond. Luke moved closer, noticing her gaze. "You're thinking about home," he said softly. Clara looked at him, surprised that he had guessed correctly. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I miss them. I miss everything I left behind." Luke offered a reassuring smile, neither trying to minimize her feelings nor offering empty words. Instead, he simply said, "It's okay to miss it." "It doesn't make you weak. It means you care." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense that someone understood her in a way few ever had. She realized that Luke was not just a stranger on a train. He was becoming a companion, someone who might walk beside her through the challenges ahead. By the time the train reached its final destination for part 2, Clara felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She knew that life in the West would not be easy, that work would be demanding, and that the unknown would test her in ways she had not yet imagined. But she also knew that she had found an unexpected ally, a quiet strength in the form of a cowboy who had seen her for who she was and admired her courage. As they disembarked, Luke offered his hand to help her down the steps. Clara took it, feeling a spark of reassurance in his steady grip. They stepped onto the platform together, ready to face whatever lay ahead. For Clara, the journey was no longer just about survival or starting over. It was about the unexpected connections that could make life richer, the quiet gestures of kindness that could sustain hope, and the possibility that someone could care for her deeply without her even realizing it. And though neither Clara nor Luke fully understood it yet, a subtle bond had been formed. A bond that would guide them through the hardships of the West, through laughter, struggles, and discoveries, and eventually lead them to a place where hearts could meet, understand, and perhaps even love. Clara stepped off the train, the dusty platform stretching out before her. The town was small but bustling with life, filled with merchants calling out their wares, horses trotting along the streets, and townsfolk moving about their daily routines. It smelled of fresh bread, hay, and the faint tang of livestock. The West was nothing like the town she had left behind. It was raw, untamed, and full of challenges she had not yet imagined. Her first days were harder than Clara had anticipated.
The work was demanding, requiring long hours in the sun, heavy lifting, and little rest. She had taken a job as a farmhand, tending to crops and caring for animals. Each day she returned to her small rented room exhausted, her muscles sore and her hands blistered from labor. Yet, despite the hardship, she felt a strange satisfaction in her work. For the first time, she was truly standing on her own, facing challenges head-on, and making something of herself. Luke remained nearby, sometimes visiting the town on his own business, sometimes offering small gestures of support. He would bring a fresh loaf of bread, check on her during breaks, or simply offer a reassuring smile when their paths crossed. Clara noticed these gestures but kept a careful distance. She did not want to rely on anyone, even someone as kind and steady as Luke. She had learned long ago that relying on others could lead to disappointment, and she was determined to build her own strength first. One afternoon, Clara was working in the fields when a sudden storm rolled in. Dark clouds gathered quickly and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. The wind howled, knocking over tools and stirring the dirt into clouds. Clara struggled to secure the animals and protect the crops, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden chaos. Just when it seemed she could manage no more, Luke appeared. Without hesitation, he helped her corral the frightened animals, his hands steady and strong. Together, they worked through the storm, moving quickly but carefully. Clara realized in that moment that she was not as alone as she had thought. Luke's presence was calming, a reminder that some challenges were easier to face when shared. The storm passed, leaving them both soaked and tired, but Clara could not help smiling. In the midst of chaos, she had found an unexpected ally. Over the following weeks, Clara and Luke spent more time together, often in the quiet moments between work and errands. They shared meals, exchanged stories of their past, and laughed at small, silly things that happened in the town. Clara found herself opening up to him in ways she had never allowed before. She spoke of her fears, her dreams, and the loneliness she had felt since leaving home. Luke listened, offering advice only when asked and always with gentle understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Clara sat on the porch of her small rented room, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Luke joined her, carrying 2 mugs of warm tea. He handed one to her without a word, and she accepted it with a grateful smile. They sat together in silence, letting the colors of the sunset speak for them. Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. For the first time, she realized that companionship could be quiet, steady, and powerful without grand gestures or declarations. Life in the West continued to test Clara's resilience. She faced unexpected challenges, broken equipment, sudden illnesses among the animals, and the constant pressure to earn enough to survive. Each obstacle demanded patience, ingenuity, and physical strength. There were days when she wanted to give up, when the weight of responsibility felt unbearable. But each time, she found herself remembering why she had come. To carve out a life of her own, to honor her family's sacrifices, and to prove to herself that she could endure. Luke's support became a subtle but steady presence in her life. He did not solve her problems for her, nor did he try to shield her from the hardships she had chosen to face. Instead, he offered guidance, encouragement, and a quiet confidence that bolstered her own determination. When she struggled with a task, he would demonstrate a technique or lend a hand, never making her feel weak or incapable. Clara began to realize that his presence was more than helpful. It was comforting. A constant reminder that she could face the West not alone, but with someone who believed in her. One day, a small fire broke out near the farm. Smoke billowed into the sky, and Clara ran to help save the livestock and belongings. Panic set in as the flames spread quickly, but Luke arrived almost instantly. Together, they managed to control the fire, working side by side with the other townsfolk. Clara was amazed by his composure under pressure, the way he stayed calm and focused even when everything around them seemed chaotic. She realized that Luke's strength was not only physical but also emotional. He could steady others even in the most frightening moments. After the fire was under control, they sat together on a nearby hill watching the remaining smoke drift into the sky. Clara's clothes were torn and soiled, her hands covered in soot, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said quietly, not wanting to fully acknowledge the depth of her feelings.
You would have done it, Luke replied simply. I just helped. We're stronger together.
His words were plain, but they carried an honesty that touched Clara deeply. She realized that he truly believed in her strength, and that belief gave her courage she had not known she possessed.
Their bond continued to grow, built not on grand declarations but on shared experiences and mutual respect.
Clara began to notice small details about Luke. The way his eyes softened when he smiled, the way he paid attention to things most people overlooked, the quiet humor that occasionally slipped into his words. She found herself thinking about him during the day, hoping to see him, wondering if he had noticed her in the same way she noticed him. Luke, too, found his thoughts drifting to Clara.
He admired her determination, her resilience, and the way she faced each challenge with courage. He appreciated her kindness, her honesty, and the way she made the world feel lighter even amidst the hardships of the West. In his mind, Clara was becoming more than just a companion. She was someone he respected deeply and quietly longed for in a way he had never expected. As autumn approached, the days grew shorter and the nights colder.
Clara faced new challenges, keeping warm in her small room, ensuring the animals had enough food, and managing the farm as the weather turned harsh. Yet with Luke's steady presence nearby, she felt a little more prepared to face whatever came next. They continued to share quiet moments, laughter, and small acts of care. It was not dramatic or showy, but it was real, and it mattered more than Clara had realized. One chilly evening as they gathered firewood together, Clara finally allowed herself to speak the thoughts she had been holding back.
Luke, she began, her voice tentative.
I'm glad you're here. I didn't think anyone would understand what this journey means to me, or how hard it is to leave everything behind.
Luke looked at her, his expression gentle.
I understand, Clara. You're strong and brave, and it's okay to need someone by your side sometimes. You don't have to face it all alone.
His words were simple, but they carried a weight that touched Clara deeply. She realized that she did not have to bear her burdens in isolation, that asking for help or accepting support did not make her weak. The following weeks continued in a similar rhythm: work, small challenges, moments of quiet reflection, and shared experiences.
Clara learned to navigate the West with greater confidence, finding ways to manage tasks more efficiently, anticipate problems, and care for herself as well as the farm.
Luke remained a constant, not as a savior, but as a companion, a guide, and someone who believed in her abilities even when she doubted herself. By the time winter approached, Clara felt a subtle shift within herself.
She was no longer the young woman who had left home with nothing but a ticket and hope. She had faced storms, fires, and exhaustion, and had emerged stronger, more capable, and more confident.
She had learned the value of persistence, the strength of resilience, and the quiet power of companionship. Luke's presence had become a steadying force, a reminder that life could be shared without diminishing personal strength. Clara realized that she had come to rely on him not because she needed saving, but because together they could face life's challenges more fully. She began to understand that connection was not a weakness, but a source of strength, a way to navigate the West with courage and hope. One snowy evening, as they sat by the fire, Clara allowed herself to look at Luke with a new awareness. She noticed the warmth in his eyes, the steady confidence in his posture, and the quiet humor that occasionally surfaced. She realized that she was not only grateful for his presence but also drawn to him in a way that went beyond friendship. Her heart, which had been guarded for so long, began to open, tentative but willing. Luke, too, felt the shift. He had admired Clara's strength from the beginning, but now he realized that his admiration had grown into something deeper. He cared for her in a way that went beyond respect or friendship, a quiet longing that he had not expected but could no longer deny. Yet he remained patient, understanding that trust and connection could not be rushed. They had to grow naturally, just as they had over the past months. By the end of Part 3, Clara and Luke had forged a bond that went beyond circumstance. They had faced challenges together, learned from each other, and discovered a shared strength that neither had anticipated. Clara had grown into a more confident, capable woman, ready to face the West with determination. Luke had found someone whose courage and heart matched his own, someone who could be both companion and equal. The hardships of the West had not been easy, but they had shaped Clara and Luke, revealing not only their individual strengths but also the power of connection.
Together they were beginning to realize that the journey ahead would be easier and richer because they faced it side by side.
And though neither could predict what the future held, both understood that they had found something rare and valuable. A partnership built on respect, courage, and a quiet, growing affection that neither could ignore. Winter had fully arrived in the west, painting the small town and surrounding fields in a blanket of soft white snow. The air was crisp, biting at Clara's cheeks as she moved about her daily chores. Despite the cold, she felt a warmth inside that had nothing to do with the weather. Over the months, she had learned to adapt to the challenges of this new land, the long hours of work, the uncertainty of each day, and the constant responsibility for the farm. But she had also learned something unexpected, the quiet power of companionship and the gentle pull of someone who had come to care for her deeply.
Clara stood outside, brushing snow off the fence posts and feeding the animals.
The work was tiring, but it grounded her, reminding her that she had grown stronger than she had ever imagined. Each task, no matter how small, felt like proof of her resilience. She thought back to the day she had sold her mother's locket to buy the train ticket west. It had been the hardest decision of her life, yet here she was, alive, capable, and slowly building a life that was entirely her own. Luke arrived that morning, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. He carried a small bundle of firewood, placing it carefully near the entrance to Clara's small cabin.
"You'll want this inside before it gets colder,"
he said, his voice warm against the sharp air. Clara smiled, grateful for the gesture, though she did not voice how much it meant to her.
"Thank you, Luke," she said simply. "You always seem to know when I need help."
He shrugged, offering a small smile.
"Just paying attention," he replied.
There was an ease to his presence, a quiet confidence that made Clara feel safe, even in the harshest weather. She realized that over time she had begun to rely on that presence, not out of necessity, but out of trust. The day passed in the familiar rhythm of work, but as the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, Clara felt a restlessness she could not ignore.
She had been thinking more and more about Luke, about the way he had been there for her, about the gentle care he had shown without ever demanding anything in return.
Her thoughts were tangled with feelings she could no longer ignore. Feelings that went beyond friendship, beyond gratitude, and into something tender and vulnerable. That evening, after the chores were done, Clara invited Luke inside her small cabin. The room was simple, but it had warmth, a place where she could finally relax after the long days. They sat by the fire, the flames casting a soft glow on their faces. Clara watched the way the light reflected in Luke's eyes, noticing details she had not before. The small crinkle at the corner of his mouth when he smiled, the way his hands moved gently as he spoke, the steadiness in his voice that seemed to anchor her heart.
"Luke," she began hesitantly, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About why I came here, and what I hope to find."
She paused, unsure how to put her thoughts into words. I never expected to find someone who cares the way you do. And I think I've been realizing how much that matters to me." Luke leaned forward slightly, his expression gentle and open. "Clara," he said softly, "I've felt the same way for a long time. From the moment I met you on that train, I noticed your strength, your courage, and your heart.
I admire you more than I can say, and over time I realized I care for you deeply, more than I expected.
I think about you constantly, and I want to be by your side not because you need me, but because I want to share this life with you." Clara felt a rush of emotions, relief, joy, and a tender vulnerability she had tried to keep hidden. She reached for his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. "Luke," she whispered, "I've been afraid to admit what I feel."
"But I care for you too, more than I can explain." For a long moment they simply held hands, the fire crackling softly in the background. There was no need for words. Their hearts had spoken for them.
Clara realized that this moment, this quiet, steady connection, was exactly what she had been searching for.
She had come west to find freedom, to start over, but she had also found someone who made the journey meaningful, someone who saw her, understood her, and valued her not for what she could do, but for who she was. The next weeks were filled with a new sense of closeness. Clara and Luke shared more than work. They shared dreams, hopes, and the small, ordinary moments that built the foundation of a life together. They laughed over simple mistakes in the kitchen, planned for future improvements to the farm, and found joy in the small wonders of the West. The way the snow sparkled under the morning sun, the quiet beauty of a star-filled night, the songs of birds returning in early spring. Clara began to notice changes in herself as well. She no longer felt the constant weight of isolation or the fear of facing the world alone. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more willing to accept help and love without guilt. Luke's presence had been a steady force in her life, encouraging her not by giving her strength but by reflecting her own. She realized that together they could face any challenge, weather any storm, and build a life that neither could achieve alone.
One morning, Clara awoke to find Luke already tending to the animals.
The sunlight filtered through the frost on the windows, and she felt a wave of gratitude for the life they were creating together. She joined him outside, helping feed the livestock and repair the fences that winter had worn down. They moved in a quiet rhythm, their actions synchronized by months of shared experience. There was comfort in the routine, but also joy, a sense that their partnership was not just practical but deeply meaningful. As spring approached, the town began to bloom with new life. The snow melted, revealing green fields and colorful wildflowers. Clara felt a sense of renewal, both in the land around her and in her own heart. She walked through the fields with Luke hand in hand, marveling at how far they had come. She thought of her journey, from selling her mother's locket to stepping onto the train, to facing hardship and finding her own strength, and realized that every step had led her to this moment. One afternoon, as they rested beneath a large oak tree, Clara turned to Luke. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said softly. "I thought freedom meant being alone, making my own way. But now I see that freedom can also mean finding someone who walks beside you, someone who believes in you and shares your dreams." Luke smiled, his eyes reflecting the sunlight. "I feel the same way," he said. "We've both worked hard to get here, but we didn't have to do it alone. And now I hope we can keep moving forward together, no matter what the future holds." Clara nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. She realized that love was not always dramatic or sudden. It could grow quietly, patiently, and steadily, building on trust, respect,
And shared experiences.
She felt gratitude for the hardship she had endured, for the sacrifices she had made, and for the courage it had taken to leave home. Without those experiences, she would not have discovered her own strength or found someone who truly understood her. In the following weeks, Clara and Luke continued to build their life together. They worked side by side on the farm, shared meals by the fire, and spent evenings talking about the future. They discussed dreams of expanding the farm, helping the town, and perhaps one day starting a family. Every conversation, every shared moment strengthened their bond and deepened their understanding of one another. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the horizon, Clara reflected on how far she had come. She had left her hometown with nothing but hope and a ticket west, and she had faced countless challenges along the way. But she had also discovered her own resilience, the value of hard work, and the quiet power of love and companionship. Luke had become more than a friend. He was a partner, an ally, and someone who had seen her through both the struggles and the triumphs of her journey. As the sky turned shades of pink and purple, Clara rested her head on Luke's shoulder. They sat in silence, letting the moment speak for itself. For Clara, this was more than a new beginning. It was a realization that life, even when uncertain and challenging, could hold beauty, love, and hope. She had sold her last possession for a ticket west, but in doing so she had found something far greater than she could have imagined, a life of her own, strengthened by courage and shared with someone who truly cherished her. The West had tested Clara, shaped her, and taught her lessons she could not have learned anywhere else. And now, standing beside Luke, she understood that the greatest reward of all was not freedom or survival, but the discovery that hearts could meet, connect, and grow together.
In the warmth of the fire, the quiet of the fields, and the presence of someone who cared deeply, Clara found the life she had been searching for, a life filled with hope, love, and the promise of tomorrow. And as the stars began to twinkle above the western sky, Clara knew that her journey was only just beginning. But for the first time, she faced the future with courage, confidence, and the knowledge that she would never face it alone.